Where was Abraham Lincoln born? Well, the history books we all read in school tell us Kentucky. A lot of people, including some historians, though, question whether that is true.
In 2015, geneticists ran the DNA of living descendants connected to Abraham Lincoln's mother. They expected to settle a 150-year-old debate. Instead, they found two things. The first confirmed a secret Lincoln begged his closest friend to take to the grave. The second was a genetic marker so rare, so unexpected, that it traced his maternal bloodline to a part of the world nobody predicted. What they discovered didn't just rewrite Lincoln's family history. It exposed how brutally America once treated children born the wrong way, and revealed that everything we assumed about colonial ancestry was a lie. The secret that could have destroyed Lincoln. Here's what you need to understand about 19th century America. If you were born outside of marriage, you were legally nobody. The law called you filius nullius, nobody's child. You couldn't inherit from your father. You had no claim to family name or property. And the social stigma? It followed you everywhere. Unwed mothers faced criminal prosecution, public whipping, fines, imprisonment in workhouses. Even after the punishments faded, the shame didn't. Families hid illegitimate children for generations, raising them as cousins or nephews rather than speak the truth. And get this, in politics, illegitimacy was a weapon. Your enemies would use it to destroy your reputation, question your morality, argue you had no right to hold office. Abraham Lincoln knew exactly how dangerous this secret was. Around 1850, Lincoln was riding in a buggy with his law partner William Herndon, heading to court in Menard County, Illinois. During that ride, Lincoln said something that would haunt American history for over a century. According to Herndon, Lincoln told him, "Billy, I'll tell you something, but keep it a secret while I live. My mother was a bastard, was the daughter of a nobleman, so-called, of Virginia." Think about that for a second. The man who would become America's greatest president, preserving the Union, ending slavery, delivering the Gettysburg Address, was confessing that his own mother was born illegitimate. He believed his intelligence, his analytical mind, his ambition all came from some mysterious, well-bred Virginia farmer or planter whose name was never recorded. Then he added something that still echoes today. "God bless my mother. All that I am or ever hope to be, I owe to her." Herndon kept his word. For decades, he said nothing. But Lincoln didn't survive his presidency, and 24 years after the assassination, Herndon faced a choice that would tear historians apart for over a century. The evidence nobody could ignore. In 1889, Herndon published Herndon's Lincoln, The True Story of a Great Life. He knew what he was doing. He knew the firestorm it would cause. But Herndon believed the truth mattered, even truth that made people uncomfortable. He'd spent years collecting interviews, letters, and testimony from everyone who'd known Lincoln. And he wasn't going to sanitize the man into a marble saint. The Lincoln family was furious. Defenders of Lincoln's legacy were outraged. Some called Herndon a liar, a drunk, a man with a grudge. Robert Todd Lincoln, Abraham's surviving son, spent years trying to control his father's image and deeply resented Herndon's revelations. But here's the catch. There was evidence, hard evidence, and it had been sitting in a Kentucky courthouse for a century. Deep in the Mercer County, Kentucky archives, researchers found a document dated November 24, 1789. It showed that a woman named Lucy Hanks had been indicted by a grand jury for fornication. Now, in late 18th century Kentucky, fornication charges meant one thing: an unmarried woman had given birth. The existence of the child was the crime. This wasn't some abstract moral offense. It was prosecutable. Women convicted could be publicly whipped, fined, or locked away in a house of correction. The timeline fit perfectly. If Nancy Hanks, Lincoln's mother, was born around 1784, and her sister Sarah around 1787, both were born before Lucy ever married anyone. The 1789 indictment aligned with a pattern of children born outside wedlock. And get this. 5 months after that indictment, Lucy Hanks wrote a note giving consent to marry a man named Henry Sparrow. She spelled it out herself, in her own handwriting. "I do certify that I am of age and give my approbation freely for Henry Sparrow to get out license this or any other day." That note still exists. You can see her spelling. You can see the urgency. Lucy and Henry married on April 30th, 1790. Less than a month later, the court dropped the fornication charges. Marriage had made Lucy respectable again. But Nancy? Nancy still carried the Hanks name, her mother's maiden name, because in English common law, illegitimate children were named after their mothers, not their fathers. The father remained a ghost. If secrets that rewrite history fascinate you, hit subscribe now, because the DNA results are about to change everything. For over a century, historians fought viciously over what this evidence meant. Some, like William Barton, argued Herndon was right, Nancy was illegitimate. Others, like Kentucky researcher Lewis Warren, insisted Nancy was actually legitimate, claiming Lucy Hanks was really Lucy Shipley, a widow whose husband James Hanks had died. Warren was absolutely certain. In 1941, he wrote that any conclusion making Lincoln's mother illegitimate was but another of the Herndon myths. The debate consumed careers. Researchers spent decades attacking each other's evidence, questioning each other's motives. But neither side could prove anything definitively. The paper trail was too thin, the frontier records too incomplete. To settle this, they needed something that didn't exist in 1889. They needed to read the genetic code itself, DNA, that shattered everything. In 2015, a team of genetic genealogists decided to end the debate once and for all. Suzanne Hallstrom, Nancy Royce, Stephen Whitlock, Richard Heilemann, and Gerald Haslam had spent decades researching the Hanks family. Some had devoted their entire careers to this mystery. Heilemann alone had been reading everything he could find on Nancy Hanks's maternal ancestry since 1980. Researching papers at the Allen County Public Library, the University of Chicago, the Library of Congress. Now they had access to technology previous generations couldn't have imagined. Their weapon was mitochondrial DNA, genetic material passed exclusively from mother to child through an unbroken female line. It doesn't mix or recombine. A woman today can carry the exact same mtDNA sequence as an ancestor who lived centuries ago. Here's the deal. Abraham Lincoln has no living descendants. His last confirmed descendant, Robert Todd Lincoln Beckwith, died in 1985 without children. The Lincoln line is extinct, but mtDNA doesn't require Lincoln's descendants. It requires descendants of any woman in his maternal line, the sisters, daughters, and granddaughters of Lucy Hanks, who carried the same genetic signature. The researchers spent years tracking down living descendants through multiple branches of the family tree. They needed to find people who could trace an unbroken female line back to Anne Lee Hanks, Lucy's mother and Nancy's grandmother, and they needed descendants of the Shipley sisters to test the competing theory. They identified two groups. Group A, living female line descendants of Anne Lee Hanks. If the Herndon theory was correct, these descendants would all share identical mtDNA. The researchers collected samples from descendants through multiple daughters of Lucy Hanks and Henry Sparrow, ensuring the results could be verified across different family branches. Group B, descendants of the Shipley sisters, Rachel and Naomi Shipley, who Warren claimed were Lucy's actual sisters. The lab at Gene by Gene in Houston ran the tests. The results were announced on October 21, 2015, commemorating the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's assassination. And this is where it gets crazy. Group A, every single descendant traced back to Anne Lee Hanks, matched perfectly. Identical mtDNA. All of them belonged to the same rare haplogroup. Group B, the Shipley descendants, showed completely different DNA. Haplogroup H, one of the most common European lineages. The two groups shared no common maternal ancestor. Not in historical times, not ever. The researchers went silent when they saw the results. They ran the tests again. The data was undeniable. The Shipley theory was dead. Lucy Hanks was exactly who Herndon said she was, a Hanks by birth, daughter of Anne Lee Hanks. And Nancy Hanks Lincoln was exactly what Abraham Lincoln had confessed, the illegitimate daughter of Lucy Hanks and an unknown father. A 150-year debate settled in a laboratory. But something else showed up in the results, something ancient, something nobody expected. The genetic marker that changed everything. When the researchers examined the specific haplogroup shared by all the Hanks line descendants, they found something that stopped them cold. Haplogroup X1C. If you know anything about genetic genealogy, that name should make you pause. Because X1C is extraordinarily rare, especially in families with colonial American ancestry. The researchers weren't expecting this. They were looking to settle a genealogical debate, not uncover something about deep human migration patterns. But there it was, confirmed across multiple descendants. Unmistakable. Here's the deal. All humans can trace their maternal lineage back to a single woman in Africa roughly 150,000 years ago. As her female descendants spread across the world, random mutations created distinct genetic signatures called haplogroups. These mutations are like timestamps. They tell us when and where different human populations split apart and migrated. Most colonial Americans of European descent carry haplogroups like H, J, T, U, or K, common lineages reflecting British, Irish, and German origins. Haplogroup H alone accounts for nearly half of all European mtDNA. If you tested a random person with colonial Virginia ancestry, you'd almost certainly find one of these common European markers. But X1C, that's something else entirely. Haplogroup X split into two branches roughly 20,000 years ago, around the time of the last ice age. X2 spread throughout Europe, the Caucasus, and even into Native American populations. About 2% of Europeans carry X2 variants today. But X1 took a completely different path. It's found primarily in North Africa, the Horn of Africa, and the Near East, regions around the Mediterranean, in Egypt, Ethiopia, and the Levant. It never spread widely into Northern Europe the way X2 did. The highest concentration of haplogroup X anywhere in the world, the Druze people of Israel, Lebanon, and Syria, where it reaches 27% of the population. Geneticists believe the Druze represent something like a genetic snapshot of the ancient Near East, a refugium of lineages that once spread across a much wider region. X1C is one of the rarest sub-branches of X1. The researchers noted that this extreme rarity actually strengthened their conclusions. Finding identical X1C matches across multiple descendants made the results far more definitive than if they'd found a common haplogroup. But here's what it revealed about Lincoln's maternal ancestry. Somewhere in the deep past, we're talking hundreds or thousands of years ago, the Hanks maternal line connected to populations most Americans never associated with colonial Virginia families. Think about that for a second. The assumption that colonial American families were genetically pure English, Irish, or Scottish. The 2015 DNA results blew that apart. Human migration and mixing have been constant throughout history. The genetic landscape of early America was far more diverse than the mythology ever admitted. The X1C haplogroup doesn't tell us anything about Nancy's mysterious father. It doesn't reveal recent ancestry or family secrets. What it reveals is something bigger. The entire narrative of pure colonial bloodlines was always a fiction, and that fiction was used to judge, shame, and destroy people like Nancy Hanks. The woman behind the data. Let's talk about who Nancy Hanks actually was. Not as a footnote in Lincoln biographies, but as a human being who lived and struggled and loved. She was born around 1784 in what was then Hampshire County, Virginia, now Mineral County, West Virginia. In 2008, the Mineral County Historical Society officially recognized a research site as her birthplace. And in 2009, Vir West Guinea's House of Delegates passed a resolution honoring her on the bicentennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Her family lived on the rough frontier edge of the American colonies, where record-keeping barely existed. This wasn't Boston or Philadelphia, with established churches and meticulous records. This was backcountry America. Families moved constantly, churches were scarce, and official documentation was often an afterthought. No birth certificate survives. No church record identifies both parents. No marriage record for Lucy exists from before Nancy's birth. What we know comes from fragments, census records, court documents, interviews with family members conducted decades later. Nancy was raised by her grandparents, Joseph and Ann Lee Hanks, from infancy. When Joseph died around 1793, 9-year-old Nancy went to live with her aunt Elizabeth Hanks and Elizabeth's husband Thomas Sparrow. She was known as Nancy Sparrow during her childhood, which only added to the confusion about her origins. And get this, Elizabeth and Thomas Sparrow raised another illegitimate child alongside Nancy. Dennis Hanks, born in 1799 to Nancy's youngest aunt. Illegitimacy ran through this family like a thread nobody wanted to acknowledge. Despite everything, Nancy grew into what neighbors called an intelligent, deeply religious, remarkably capable woman. She learned to read, she learned needlework, she worked for families in the neighborhood. In 1806, she married Thomas Lincoln. They had 3 children, Sarah, Abraham, and Thomas Jr., who died in infancy. In 1818, at their frontier homestead in Indiana, a disease called milk sickness swept through the community. It came from drinking milk of cows that had eaten white snake root, though nobody understood that at the time. Elizabeth and Thomas Sparrow, the aunt and uncle who raised Nancy, died first. Weeks later, Nancy fell ill. She was 34 years old when she died. Abraham was 9. He and his father built her coffin themselves. They buried her on a hillside south of the family farm. Years later, Lincoln would say, "All that I am or ever hope to be, I owe to her." He meant it, and he carried the secret of her birth for his entire life. What this actually means? So, what's disturbing about everything we've uncovered? Not the X1C haplogroup. That's ancient history, a genetic footnote revealing that human ancestry is always more complicated than anyone assumes. Number. The disturbing part is what this story reveals about America itself. Lucy Hanks was a young woman in late 18th century Virginia. She became pregnant outside marriage, whether through love, seduction, or something darker, we'll never know. That pregnancy made her a criminal. She faced public humiliation, potential physical punishment, and permanent social disgrace. Nancy Hanks grew up marked. She carried a name that announced her status to anyone who understood such things. She was raised by relatives, not her mother. She knew what she was in the eyes of the law, nobody's child. And Abraham Lincoln? He rose from a one-room cabin on the Kentucky frontier to become the most consequential president in American history. He preserved the Union. He ended slavery. He delivered words that still define what America claims to be. But here's the catch. He did all of it while carrying a secret that could have destroyed him. If Lincoln's political enemies had discovered the full truth about his mother's birth, they would have weaponized it. They would have questioned his character, his morality, his fitness for office. In the brutal politics of 19th century America, illegitimacy was ammunition. Lincoln knew this. That's why he told Herndon to keep it secret while he lived. The 2015 DNA study didn't reveal anything scandalous about Lincoln's genetics. What it confirmed was the truth of a burden he carried alone, the truth about his mother that he could only share in whispered confidence with his closest friend, and it revealed something else, the systems of shame and stigma that punished women like Lucy Hanks, that marked children like Nancy as legally non-existent, that forced families to hide the truth for generations. Those systems shaped American history in ways we're still uncovering. The disturbing truth isn't Lincoln's ancestry. It's how much power, secrecy, and stigma once held over human lives, and how one man rose above all of it anyway. Here's what the DNA actually proved. Nancy Hanks, Lincoln, was the illegitimate daughter of Lucy Hanks. The Shipley theory, which claimed Nancy was legitimately born, has been genetically destroyed. Lincoln's maternal ancestry includes the rare haplogroup X1C, a lineage most commonly found in North Africa and the Near East. This represents ancient ancestry, not recent family scandal, but it demolishes the myth of pure colonial European bloodlines. The identity of Nancy's father, Lincoln's maternal grandfather, that mysterious well-bred Virginia farmer or planter, remains unknown, and it probably always will. But the real story isn't about DNA. It's about a nation that criminalized women for pregnancies outside marriage. It's about children born into stigma they never chose. It's about secrets kept for generations because the cost of honesty was simply too high. And it's about a man who refused to let any of it define him. Lincoln told Herndon he inherited his best qualities from his mother. Whether that's biologically true or not, he believed it. He saw his origins not as shame, but as proof that greatness can emerge from anywhere, from the most unlikely circumstances, from the people the world tried hardest to forget. Consider what Lincoln actually accomplished. He had almost no formal education, maybe 18 months total in frontier schoolhouses. His father couldn't write his own name. The family owned no slaves, barely owned land, and moved constantly chasing better opportunities that rarely came. And yet Lincoln became the most consequential president in American history. He held the Union together through its bloodiest war. He ended slavery, an institution that had existed in America for over 2 centuries. He wrote words that still define what this country claims to stand for. He did all of this while knowing that somewhere in a Kentucky courthouse, there was a document proving his grandmother had been indicted for the crime of having his mother. He did this knowing that if his enemies ever discovered the full truth, they would use it to destroy everything he'd built. The secret never broke. Nancy Hanks was born around 1784 to a woman who faced criminal charges for bringing her into the world. She was raised by relatives, carried her mother's name, and grew up knowing exactly what society thought of her. She married a man who couldn't sign his own name. She lived in a one-room cabin on the frontier. She raised a son who changed everything. And when modern science finally confirmed what Lincoln confessed in that buggy ride over 170 years ago, it didn't diminish him. It reminded us what he overcame. It showed us that the mythology of pure colonial ancestry was always a lie. And it proved that the systems of shame America built to punish people, like Lucy and Nancy Hanks, ultimately failed because they couldn't stop greatness. All that I am or ever hope to be, I owe to her. Lincoln meant those words. And now we know exactly what he was talking about. If this made you rethink what you thought you knew about American history, subscribe and hit that bell. And tell me in the comments, what other historical mysteries should modern science solve next?